I came home from work on a Tuesday to find heavy construction equipment tearing up the community park where my kids had learned to ride their bikes. The sun was setting over Riverside Meadows, our planned community in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the roar of bulldozers drowned out everything else. I pulled my Honda into the driveway and sat there for a moment, watching a massive excavator rip chunks of grass and soil from what had been our neighborhood's central gathering space. The playground where Emma had scraped her knee last summer was already gone, reduced to twisted metal in a dumpster. My wife Sarah met me at the door, her face pale. "Did you see what they're doing?" "I saw," I said, loosening my tie. "What the hell is going on?" "Nobody knows. Jennifer from next door said the equipment just showed up this morning. No warning, no notice, nothing." I walked through our house and out the back door, crossing our small yard to the fence that bordered the common area. At least a dozen of my neighbors had gathered there, all of us staring at the destruction in disbelief. The park had been one of the main reasons we bought in Riverside Meadows 5 years ago. It was a 3-acre green space with walking trails, a gazebo, a playground, and open fields where the neighborhood kids played soccer on weekends. "Tom, thank God you're here," said Marcus Chen from 2 houses down. He worked as an accountant and was usually the calm one in any situation, but right now his hands were shaking. "Did you get any notification about this?" "Nothing," I said. "Not a single word." "Me neither," said Jennifer Kowalski, a single mom who lived in the corner unit. "I called the HOA office 3 times today. Nobody answered." The Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association had always been a pain in the neck, obsessed with mailbox colors and lawn height, but this was different. This was our shared property, land we collectively owned as homeowners. They couldn't just destroy it without telling us. "There has to be some kind of permit posted," I said, squinting at the construction site. "Let me go look." I climbed over the fence, ignoring the shouts from the construction workers. A man in a yellow hard hat intercepted me before I got 10 feet. "Sir, you need to leave this area. Active construction zone." "This is private property," I said. "Community property." "Who authorized this?" "Take it up with the developer," he said, pointing to a trailer at the far end of the site. "Sterling Heights Development. Now please leave before I call the police." I wanted to argue, but 3 more workers were heading my way, so I backed off. When I climbed back over the fence, my neighbors crowded around. "Sterling Heights Development," I told them. "That's who's doing this." Marcus pulled out his phone and started searching. "Here they are. They're a major commercial developer, shopping centers, apartment complexes, that kind of thing." "Apartment complexes," Jennifer's voice rose. "They're building apartments here." "We need to get into that HOA office," I said. "Tomorrow morning, first thing, something is seriously wrong." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the contracts we'd all signed when we bought our homes. The HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions clearly stated that the common areas belonged to all homeowners collectively. The board managed them, but they couldn't just sell them. Could they? At 7 in the morning, I was standing outside the HOA office in the strip mall near our neighborhood entrance. Marcus and Jennifer were with me, along with half a dozen other neighbors. The office didn't open until 9, so we waited, drinking coffee from the Dunkin' Donuts next door and getting angrier by the minute. When Patricia Brennan, the HOA president, finally showed up at 8:45, she looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Patricia was exactly the person you'd imagine running an HOA. A 52-year-old woman with a severe haircut and a permanent expression of disapproval. She'd sent me 3 violation notices in the past year alone, including one because my trash cans were visible from the street for 15 minutes past the pickup deadline. "We need to talk," I said as she approached the door. "Office hours start at 9, Patricia said, not making eye contact. "Patricia, they're tearing up the park," Jennifer said. Our park. You need to tell us what's happening. All information will be distributed to homeowners in due course through proper channels. Proper channels, Marcus stepped forward. There are bulldozers destroying community property, and you're talking about proper channels. Patricia unlocked the door and tried to slip inside, but I caught it before she could close it in our faces. We're not leaving until you explain what's going on. She turned and I saw something in her eyes that chilled me. Not guilt exactly, more like resignation mixed with defiance. Fine, come inside, but only 3 of you. Marcus, Jennifer, and I followed her into the small office. The walls were covered with notices about pool rules and architectural guidelines. Patricia sat behind her desk and folded her hands, not inviting us to sit. The board made a decision 6 months ago to sell the common areas to Sterling Heights Development, she said, her voice flat. The sale closed 3 weeks ago. Construction began yesterday as per the development agreement. The room was silent for a long moment. I couldn't quite process what she'd just said. You sold our park, Jennifer finally said. You can't do that. The board has the authority to make decisions regarding community assets, Patricia said. It's in the bylaws. Bullshit, I said. I've read those bylaws. Major decisions require a vote of the homeowners. Selling common property absolutely requires a vote. The board consulted with legal counsel. Our actions were within our authority. Marcus was scrolling through his phone. Here, Section 12 of the bylaws. Sale of common property requires approval by 2/3 of homeowners in a properly noticed vote. You didn't hold any vote. As I said, our attorney advised us that the board could proceed. Who's your attorney? I demanded. That's confidential. How much did they pay you? Jennifer asked. For the land, Patricia's jaw tightened. That's HOA business. We are the HOA, I said, my voice rising. Every homeowner is part of this association. You work for us, Patricia. You're supposed to represent our interests. I'm done with this conversation. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. How much? I said again, not moving. How much did Sterling Heights pay for 3 acres of prime Charlotte real estate? Patricia stood up. Get out or I'm calling the police. Call them, Marcus said. Because I want to know what they think about this situation. For a moment, Patricia looked uncertain, then she picked up her phone. I'm serious, I will call them. You know what, do it, I said. I'd love to have a police report started on this whole mess. She didn't call. Instead, she walked to the door and held it open. This meeting is over. All communications need to go through proper channels. You can submit written questions to the board and we'll respond within 30 days. 30 days. Jennifer looked like she might cry. In 30 days, there won't be a park left. That's not my problem. We left because there was nothing else we could do at that moment, but I was already forming a plan. Outside, the rest of our neighbors crowded around. She admitted they sold it, I told them. 6 months ago, they didn't tell anyone, didn't hold a vote, just sold our common areas out from under us. The anger rippled through the group. Someone suggested going back to the construction site and blocking the equipment. Someone else wanted to chain themselves to the gazebo before it got demolished. I understood the impulse, but we needed to be smart about this. We need a lawyer, I said. A good one. This is fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, probably a dozen other things. But we need to do this right. Lawyers are expensive, someone said. Class action, Marcus said immediately. If every homeowner joins, we split the costs. And any lawyer worth their salt will see this case as a slam dunk. By noon, I'd sent an email to every homeowner in Riverside Meadows. We had 147 homes in our development, and by the end of the day, I had responses from 93 of them. Every single one wanted in on a lawsuit. That evening, we held an emergency meeting at the community pool. Technically, the pool was also common property, but it hadn't been included in the sale. Maybe because it wasn't worth as much, Or maybe because even Patricia realized that selling the pool would cause an immediate riot. Over 100 people showed up, crowding around the pool deck in the fading light. I stood on a chair to address everyone. "Here's what we know," I said. "The HOA board sold our common areas to a developer 6 months ago without telling us or holding a vote. This is a direct violation of our bylaws and probably several laws." The board president admitted it to us this morning but refuses to provide any details. "What are they building?" someone shouted. "An apartment complex," Marcus said. "I did some research." Sterling Heights filed permits for a 120-unit apartment building with ground-floor retail. The crowd erupted in angry voices. Our neighborhood was all single-family homes, deliberately planned that way. We'd all paid premium prices for houses in a community that promised low density, green spaces, and a family-friendly environment. 120 apartments would fundamentally change everything. "The traffic alone will be insane," Jennifer said. "We only have one entrance to this neighborhood." "And our property values," someone else added. "They're going to tank." "That's why we're suing," I said. "I've already contacted 3 law firms that specialize in HOA disputes. I have calls scheduled with all of them tomorrow. We need to move fast because every day that construction continues is more damage done." "What about an injunction?" asked David Rodriguez, who lived on Maple Court. "Can't we get a judge to stop the construction while the lawsuit is pending?" "That's exactly what I'm going to ask about," I said, "but we need to be organized. We need documentation. If anyone has any emails, letters, or notices from the HOA board over the past year, especially anything mentioning the common areas or any kind of development, send them to me." "I got a notice about pool maintenance," someone said. "Send it anyway, we need everything." "What about the rest of the board?" Jennifer asked. "Patricia's not the only one." "There are 5 board members." She was right. Besides Patricia, the board included Donald Marsh, a retired insurance agent who usually just nodded at whatever Patricia said. Brenda Whitmore, who'd been on the board for a decade and was slightly less awful than Patricia. Gregory Stone, a middle-aged real estate agent who I'd always suspected had conflicts of interest. And Cheryl Hamilton, who just joined the board last year and seemed overwhelmed by everything. "We need to talk to all of them," Marcus said. "Separately if possible, there might be cracks in their united front." "I'll take Cheryl," Jennifer volunteered. "We're on the PTA together." "Maybe she'll talk to me." Over the next 2 days, our amateur investigation kicked into high gear. Jennifer did manage to corner Cheryl Hamilton at school pickup, and what she learned was explosive. Cheryl broke down crying and admitted that she'd been pressured into voting for the sale. Patricia had told the board members that the HOA was facing a major financial crisis, and that selling the common areas was the only way to avoid bankruptcy. "But we're not bankrupt," Marcus said when we met at my house to compare notes. "I've seen the HOA financials. They're public record. We have over $200,000 in reserves." "Patricia lied to her own board members," I said. "This gets worse every day." "There's more," Jennifer said. "Cheryl said that Gregory Stone has a connection to Sterling Heights development. His real estate firm has worked with them before." "That's a massive conflict of interest," Marcus said. "He should have recused himself from any vote." "Did he?" I asked Jennifer. "No." "According to Cheryl, he pushed hard for the sale. He's the one who brought Sterling Heights to the board in the first place." I sat back, processing this. So Gregory brings the developer to the board, probably getting some kind of kickback or commission. Patricia sees an opportunity for God knows what and pushes it through by lying about our financial situation. And the other board members either go along because they're scared or because they're too passive to object. "Except Cheryl," Jennifer said, "and she's terrified now. She knows she could be liable." "She should talk to our lawyer," I said. If she cooperates, it'll help everyone except the people who actually orchestrated this fraud. My first consultation was with Rebecca Torres from Mitchell & Torres LLP, a firm in Charlotte that specialized in real estate litigation. I drove to their office in downtown Charlotte, a gleaming tower that made me feel both hopeful and nervous. This was going to be expensive, even split among 100 homeowners. Rebecca was in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and an intensity that I immediately appreciated. I spent an hour laying out everything we knew, showing her the bylaws, the construction permits I'd obtained from the county, and the statements from Cheryl Hamilton that Jennifer had gotten. When I finished, Rebecca leaned back in her chair. "This is egregious. I've handled a lot of HOA disputes, but this is particularly bad." "Can we stop the construction?" I asked. "We can try for a temporary restraining order and then a preliminary injunction. We'd need to show irreparable harm and likelihood of success on the merits. Given what you've told me, I think we have a strong case for both. How fast can we move?" "I can file the complaint and the motion for a TRO by end of business tomorrow. We might get a hearing within a week." "And the cost?" Rebecca named a number that made me wince, but then explained her proposal. She'd take the case on a modified contingency basis. We'd pay reduced hourly fees upfront, split among all the plaintiffs, and she'd take a percentage of any damages we won. Given that we'd likely be suing for the value of the land, attorney fees, and possibly punitive damages, her firm was willing to take the risk. "I want this case," she said bluntly. "It's important, it's winnable, and quite frankly, HOA boards need to learn they can't pull this kind of garbage." I shook her hand. "When can you start?" "I already have." True to her word, Rebecca moved fast. By Thursday afternoon, I received a draft of the complaint to review. It named the HOA board members individually, the Riverside Meadows HOA as an entity, and Sterling Heights Development as defendants. The claims included breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, violation of the HOA bylaws, unjust enrichment, and conspiracy. Reading it gave me a grim satisfaction. These people had thought they could get away with selling our property behind our backs. Now they were going to face consequences. Rebecca filed the lawsuit Friday morning in Mecklenburg County Superior Court. By Friday afternoon, Patricia Brennan was calling my phone nonstop. I didn't answer. All communication was going to go through our attorney now. Saturday morning, I woke up to find my driveway blocked by Patricia's black Mercedes SUV. I went outside in my bathrobe to find her standing on my front lawn. "You need to drop this lawsuit," she said without preamble. Her hair was disheveled, and she looked like she hadn't slept. "Get off my property, Patricia. You're going to ruin everything. Do you understand that? Everything we've built here. You already ruined it when you sold our park. We did what was necessary for the financial health of the community." "That's a lie and you know it. We've seen the financials. The HOA isn't broke." Patricia's face flushed. "You don't understand the full picture. There are expenses coming that you don't know about. Then you should have told us. That's what transparency means." "I'm trying to help you," she said, and there was a desperate edge to her voice now. "If this lawsuit goes forward, you're going to lose. Sterling Heights has attorneys that will bury you in paperwork. This will drag on for years. Your legal fees will bankrupt half the neighborhood. We're not dropping it. Tom, please." She actually reached out like she was going to grab my arm. "You seem like a reasonable person. Let's talk about this. Maybe we can work out a compromise." "A compromise?" "The park is already half destroyed, Patricia. What kind of compromise do you think exists here? The developer could include amenities for the neighborhood. A new playground, maybe access to the apartment complex's fitness center." I stared at her. "You think we want access to their gym? We want our park back. We want our property rights respected." And honestly, at this point, I want everyone involved in this scheme to face consequences. You're making a mistake. No, you made the mistake. Now please leave before I call the police. She stood there for a moment longer, and I saw something crumble in her expression. Then she turned and walked back to her Mercedes, driving away without another word. Sarah had watched the whole thing from the doorway. "She's scared," she said. "Good, she should be." Our hearing for the temporary restraining order was scheduled for the following Thursday. Rebecca warned me that getting a TRO was a long shot, since they usually required a higher standard of immediate irreparable harm. But the preliminary injunction hearing the following week was our real target. In the meantime, the construction continued. Every day I watched more of our park disappear. They'd demolished the gazebo where Jennifer's daughter had gotten married last summer. They'd torn up the walking trail where Marcus and I used to jog on weekend mornings. The playground was completely gone, hauled away as scrap metal. The neighborhood was united in anger. Even people who'd never come to HOA meetings before were suddenly engaged. We organized a protest at the construction site, standing outside the fence with signs. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly we were on the evening broadcast. A Charlotte neighborhood is fighting back after their HOA allegedly sold community property without permission, the reporter said, standing in front of our ruined park. Homeowners say they had no idea their common areas were being sold until construction equipment showed up. They interviewed me, Marcus, and Jennifer. We explained what happened, showed the bylaws, and made our case to the public. The response was overwhelming. Our story went viral on social media. Other HOA horror stories flooded in from across the country. We'd apparently touched a nerve. Sterling Heights Development issued a statement saying they'd purchased the property in good faith from the legitimate representatives of the HOA, and that they'd obtained all proper permits. They painted themselves as innocent buyers caught in a neighborhood dispute, but Rebecca wasn't buying it. They knew, she told me over the phone. No developer purchases 3 acres in the middle of a residential neighborhood without doing due diligence. They had to have seen the bylaws. They knew a proper vote wasn't held. Can we prove that? Discovery will help. I'm going to request all communications between the board members and Sterling Heights. If there's evidence they knew about the improper sale, we might have them on fraud too. The Thursday hearing was my first time inside a courtroom. Judge Catherine Morrison presided, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. Rebecca presented our case for the TRO, arguing that every day of continued construction caused irreparable harm to the homeowner's property rights and property values. The defendant's attorneys pushed back hard. Sterling Heights had brought in a heavy-hitting firm from Atlanta, and their lead counsel, a man named Richard Carlisle, argued that stopping construction would cause massive financial harm to his client, who'd invested millions in the project. "Your Honor, the developer purchased this property in good faith," Carlisle said. "They've obtained all necessary permits, followed all regulations, and invested substantial resources. Halting construction based on an internal HOA dispute would be inappropriate and potentially devastating." "This isn't an internal dispute," Rebecca countered. "This is theft of community property." The HOA board violated their own bylaws and breached their fiduciary duty to every homeowner they represent. Judge Morrison listened carefully, asked pointed questions, and then denied our TRO request. My heart sank until she continued speaking. "However, I am deeply troubled by the allegations in this complaint. I'm expediting the preliminary injunction hearing to next Monday. I want full briefing from both sides on the question of whether the HOA board had authority to sell common property without a homeowner vote. I also want the HOA's attorney who allegedly provided this guidance to submit an affidavit explaining the legal basis for that advice. Rebecca squeezed my arm as we left the courtroom. "That's actually good," she whispered. "She's signaling that she thinks you have a case." That weekend was a flurry of preparation. Rebecca's associate attorneys worked around the clock preparing our brief. Jennifer managed to convince Cheryl Hamilton to provide a sworn affidavit detailing the lies Patricia had told the board. Marcus obtained documentation showing the HOA's actual financial state, proving there was no crisis that would have justified an emergency sale. I focused on documenting the damage. I took hundreds of photos of the destruction, comparing them to old photos of the park in its pristine state. I compiled testimony from homeowners about how they'd relied on the common areas when purchasing their homes. I gathered real estate listings from when we'd all bought our houses, showing how the developer had marketed the community specifically based on its green spaces and amenities. On Sunday evening, something unexpected happened. Brenda Whitmore, one of the board members, called me directly. "Tom, this is Brenda. Can we talk? I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can I come to your house?" 20 minutes later, Brenda was sitting in my living room. She was in her mid-60s, a retired teacher who'd always seemed like one of the more reasonable board members. But she'd still voted for the sale. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Patricia is going to kill me, but I can't sleep anymore. This whole thing is wrong." "What do you need to tell me?" Gregory Stone did get paid by Sterling Heights. Not officially, not on any books, but I overheard him talking to Patricia. He got $50,000 as a consulting fee for bringing the deal together. My hands tightened on my armrest. That's corruption. That's literally selling out the neighborhood for personal profit. I know, and there's more. The sale price was $1.2 million. That's way under market value. I looked up comparable sales. That land should have gone for at least $3 million, probably more. So Sterling Heights got a sweetheart deal, Gregory got a kickback, and what did Patricia get? Brenda looked at her hands. I don't know for sure, but she took a vacation to Italy right after the sale closed. 3 weeks, very expensive. She told us her sister paid for it, but I don't know. Will you testify to this? If I'm subpoenaed, yes. I can't volunteer. I'm still on the board technically, and I'm already going to have problems. But if the court orders me to testify, I will. Brenda, why did you vote for this in the first place? She looked up, and there were tears in her eyes. Patricia said we were in financial trouble. She had spreadsheets, projections. She made it seem like if we didn't sell, we'd have to do a special assessment, and every homeowner would have to pay $5,000 just to keep the HOA solvent. I'm on a fixed income. $5,000 is a lot for me, so I voted yes because I thought I was helping. She manipulated you. I know that now. I was stupid. I should have asked for a second opinion, should have demanded to see the actual bank statements. But Patricia has a way of making you feel like questioning her means you're the problem. I knew exactly what she meant. Patricia had that gift for making you feel like you were being unreasonable whenever you challenged her authority. Monday morning arrived. The courtroom was packed with homeowners from Riverside Meadows. Judge Morrison looked out at the crowd and raised her eyebrows. "This is quite a turnout. Let's proceed." Rebecca's presentation was devastating. She walked through the bylaws point by point, showing exactly how the board had violated them. She presented Cheryl Hamilton's affidavit. She showed the financial records proving there was no crisis. She had testimony from a real estate expert about the below-market sale price. Then she dropped the bombshell about Gregory Stone's payment from Sterling Heights. Carlisle, the developer's attorney, jumped to his feet objecting, but Rebecca had documentation. Bank records showing a wire transfer from a Sterling Heights subsidiary to Gregory Stone for consulting services, dated 1 week before the sale closed. Your Honor, this isn't a good faith sale, Rebecca said. This is a corrupt transaction where an HOA board member personally profited by selling community property at below-market rates to a developer he was secretly working for. Every homeowner in Riverside Meadows has been defrauded. Judge Morrison's expression was thunderous. She looked at the HOA's attorney, a nervous young man named Paul Hendricks. Counselor, you provided an opinion letter to the HOA board stating they could proceed with this sale without a homeowner vote. What was your reasoning? Hendricks stood up, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Your Honor, I advised the board that in my interpretation of Section 8 of the bylaws, which grants the board authority to manage community assets, they had discretion to make decisions regarding property sales. Section 8 deals with routine management decisions, Rebecca interjected. Things like hiring landscapers and setting pool hours. Section 12 explicitly requires a 2/3 homeowner vote for any sale of common property. How did you reconcile that? I believed Section 8 took precedence as the more general authority grant. Judge Morrison looked incredulous. Counselor, are you seriously arguing that a general management clause overrides a specific requirement for homeowner approval of property sales? It was a judgment call, Your Honor. It was malpractice, the judge said flatly. And I question whether you actually believed that interpretation or whether you were simply telling your client what they wanted to hear. Hendricks sat down, his face red. The developer's attorney tried to salvage things. Your Honor, regardless of the internal HOA issues, my client acted in good faith. They purchased property from the legal representatives of the HOA. They can't be punished for the HOA's governance problems. Your client paid a board member $50,000, Rebecca said. That's not good faith. That's participating in a corrupt transaction. That payment was for legitimate consulting services. What consulting? He was already on the HOA board representing the homeowners. The only thing he consulted on was how to push through an illegal sale. Judge Morrison held up her hand. I've heard enough. Here's my ruling. I'm granting a preliminary injunction halting all construction on the property pending resolution of this case. The evidence presented suggests strongly that the sale was conducted in violation of the HOA's governing documents and possibly through fraudulent misrepresentations. The courtroom erupted in cheers from the homeowners. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Furthermore, I'm ordering an expedited discovery schedule. I want all communications between the HOA board members and Sterling Heights Development produced within 30 days. I want all financial records from the HOA for the past 3 years. And I want depositions of all board members completed within 60 days. She looked directly at Hendricks. I'm also referring this matter to the North Carolina State Bar for investigation of potential ethical violations. Counselor, you may want to consult with your own attorney. We left the courthouse in triumph. I called Sarah from the parking lot. We won, they have to stop construction. Oh, thank God, she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. So what happens now? Now we prove our case and get our park back. Over the next month, discovery revealed the full extent of the corruption. Sterling Heights had been courting Gregory Stone for over a year, wining and dining him, discussing development opportunities. When the common area sale came up, Gregory had pitched it to Patricia as a way to generate revenue. Patricia had then manufactured the financial crisis story to scare the other board members into approving it. The smoking gun came in an email from Gregory to Patricia. Don't worry about the vote. Hendricks will give us legal cover. As long as we have his opinion letter, we can push this through. Worst case, some homeowners complain after the fact, but by then the sale will be final. That email showed intent to circumvent the bylaws. It showed they knew they were supposed to hold a vote and deliberately avoided it. It was exactly what we needed. Depositions were even better. Donald Marsh, the retired insurance agent, broke down and admitted he just voted however Patricia told him to because he didn't want conflict. Cheryl Hamilton provided detailed testimony about the pressure tactics Patricia had used. Even Brenda Whitmore, once subpoenaed, testified about the manufactured financial crisis and Gregory's suspicious payment. Patricia herself was a disaster on the stand. She was combative, defensive, and contradicted herself multiple times. When Rebecca asked her directly whether she disclosed Gregory's payment from Sterling Heights to the other board members before the vote, Patricia claimed attorney-client privilege, which made no sense and made her look even more guilty. Gregory Stone took the Fifth Amendment on every question about his financial arrangements with Sterling Heights. By December, settlement talks had begun. Sterling Heights wanted out. The injunction had frozen their entire project, and they were bleeding money on a construction loan for a half-built foundation going nowhere. More importantly, the criminal investigation had started. The district attorney's office had taken an interest after Judge Morrison's preliminary injunction hearing. Corruption in HOA governance was technically a crime in North Carolina if it involved self-dealing and fraud. The DA's investigators were now looking into whether Gregory Stone and Patricia Brennan had violated state laws against embezzlement and misappropriation of association funds. In January, Gregory was arrested at his home. The charges included fraud, breach of fiduciary duty under the criminal statute, and accepting illegal kickbacks. Patricia was arrested the same day on similar charges, plus one count of conspiracy. Watching the news footage of Patricia being led out of her house in handcuffs was surreal. This woman who'd terrorized the neighborhood for years with her petty power trips was now facing actual consequences for her actions. The settlement negotiations moved quickly after that. Sterling Heights agreed to deed the property back to the Riverside Meadows HOA for $1. They also agreed to pay for restoration of the land, returning it as closely as possible to its original condition. That meant rebuilding the playground, replanting trees and grass, and reconstructing the walking trail. Additionally, Sterling Heights paid $3 million in damages to be distributed among the homeowners. Their attorney argued they were victims too, but Rebecca demolished that argument. The evidence showed Sterling Heights had been actively complicit in the corrupt sale, and paying damages was cheaper than continuing to fight and potentially facing criminal charges themselves. The HOA board members were sued individually as well. Patricia and Gregory had their personal assets frozen pending the criminal trials. Donald Marsh settled for $100,000 from his personal funds. Brenda Whitmore and Cheryl Hamilton were allowed to settle for nominal amounts given their cooperation and the evidence they'd been deceived. Paul Hendricks, the attorney who'd provided the bogus legal opinion, lost his law license. The state bar found he'd violated multiple ethical rules, including failing to provide competent representation and participating in fraudulent conduct. His firm settled with us for an additional $1 million to avoid a malpractice lawsuit. By April, the criminal trials began. I attended every day, watching as prosecutors laid out the scheme in detail. The jury heard about the manufactured financial crisis, the secret payments, the below-market sale price. They saw the emails where Gregory and Patricia had congratulated themselves on pulling off the deal. Gregory Stone was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 4 years in prison plus restitution. Patricia Brennan was convicted as well, though she got 3 years due to slightly less direct financial benefit. Both were ordered to pay back the money they'd received and to contribute to the restoration costs. Watching them be led away in orange jumpsuits felt like justice, but it was bittersweet. Our neighborhood had been through hell. Families had fought over whether to join the lawsuit. Some people had moved away rather than deal with the stress. The sense of community we'd once had was damaged, maybe permanently. But by summer, the restoration was complete. Sterling Heights had hired a landscape company that did an incredible job. The new playground was even better than the old one, with modern equipment and safety surfacing. The walking trail had been redesigned with better drainage. They'd planted mature trees to replace some of what had been lost. We held a grand reopening celebration in July. Over 200 people attended, including homeowners, their families, and even some reporters who'd followed our story. Judge Morrison came too, speaking briefly about the importance of holding leaders accountable and protecting community rights. "What happened here was wrong," she said. "But your response was exactly right. You organized, you got good legal help, and you fought for what was yours. Every HOA board in this state should take note. You serve the homeowners, not yourselves." The applause was deafening. Later, I stood with Marcus and Jennifer at the edge of the park, watching kids play on the new equipment. My daughter Emma was on the swings, pumping her legs and laughing. "We did it," Jennifer said. "I still can't quite believe it." "Took a year of our lives," Marcus said, "but yeah, we did it. Think this will stop other HOA boards from trying something similar?" I asked. "Maybe," Marcus said. "Word's gotten around. I've had people from other neighborhoods contact me asking for advice. Apparently, HOA corruption is more common than we thought." "That's depressing," Jennifer said. "But maybe we started something," I said. "Maybe other people will see what we did and know they can fight back too." Sarah found me a little later, bringing me a lemonade from the refreshment table. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just thinking about everything that happened. Any regrets?" I thought about the stress, the legal bills, the countless hours of meetings and document review. I thought about the fights with neighbors who'd wanted to give up, the sleepless nights wondering if we'd made things worse. "No," I said finally, "no regrets, this mattered." She squeezed my hand. It really did. The settlement money had been distributed among all homeowners, roughly $20,000 per household. Some people used it to offset their legal fees, which had been minimal thanks to Rebecca's contingency arrangement, but still added up. Others put it toward home improvements or savings. Sarah and I invested ours in college funds for the kids. The HOA board was completely reorganized. We held new elections, with multiple candidates running for every position. I briefly considered running myself, but decided I'd had enough of HOA politics for a lifetime. Marcus ended up on the board, along with Jennifer and 3 other level-headed neighbors. Their first act was to amend the bylaws to add even more protections. Now any sale of common property required not just a 2/3 vote, but also an independent appraisal and a 60-day comment period. They also implemented term limits for board members and required quarterly financial transparency meetings. Basically, we're making it impossible for anyone to ever pull what Patricia did again, Marcus told me at one of the first new board meetings. The national attention our case received led to legislative action. A state representative from Charlotte introduced a bill requiring HOAs to hold homeowner votes for any sale of common property exceeding a certain value. The bill passed with strong bipartisan support, and similar legislation was introduced in several other states. Patricia's criminal trial had revealed something else interesting. The manufactured financial crisis wasn't entirely made up. The HOA did have some deferred maintenance issues, but instead of addressing them transparently with a special assessment or increased dues, Patricia had seen the land sale as a way to solve the problem without having to admit she'd mismanaged the budget for years. She'd rather commit fraud than admit she made mistakes. Rebecca told me when we met for coffee after everything was resolved. It's a surprisingly common personality trait in people who seek power in HOAs. Why do you think that is? I asked. Small pond, big fish syndrome. These people would never have real authority in any other context, so they gravitate toward HOAs where they can exercise control over their neighbors. When challenged, they double down rather than admit fault because the authority is all they have. It was a sad but accurate assessment. I thought about all the petty violation notices Patricia had sent over the years, all the times she'd flexed her power over minor issues. She'd needed that sense of control so badly that she destroyed her own life rather than give it up. In October, I ran into Paul Hendricks, the disbarred attorney, at a grocery store. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. When he saw me, he started to turn away, but then stopped. "Tom, I just want to say I'm sorry. What I did was wrong." I looked at him for a moment. Part of me wanted to walk away, to refuse to even acknowledge him. But another part of me remembered that he'd been young and probably pressured by Patricia and Gregory. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "You had to know that legal opinion was garbage." I did know, but Gregory was pushing hard and Patricia was very convincing about the financial situation. And honestly, I needed the business. My firm was small and the HOA was a steady client. I told myself it was a gray area that reasonable attorneys could disagree. But they couldn't. It wasn't gray at all. I know. I rationalized it because I didn't want to lose the client. And now I've lost my career. He paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you won. What they did was wrong and I should have stopped it." "Yeah, you should have." He nodded and walked away. I felt a tiny bit of sympathy for him, but only a tiny bit. He'd been an adult making professional decisions, and he'd chosen to put his interests ahead of ethics and the law. By the time the 1-year anniversary of the first bulldozer arriving rolled around, life in Riverside Meadows had mostly returned to normal. The park was being used constantly. Property values, which had initially dipped during the lawsuit, had rebounded and actually increased beyond where they'd been before. Turns out that successfully fighting off a corrupt HOA board made the neighborhood more desirable, not less. The community felt stronger too. We'd been through something together, fought for something together. The monthly HOA meetings were now attended by dozens of homeowners instead of the usual 5 or 6. People were engaged, informed, and vigilant. One Saturday afternoon, I was at the park watching Emma and her friends play soccer. Jennifer sat down on the bench next to me. "You hear about the development 3 miles from here?" she asked. "What about it?" Their HOA board tried to sell their tennis courts to a gas station developer. The homeowners found out and immediately filed suit. They used our case as precedent. I smiled. Good for them. They already won a temporary injunction. Apparently, the board folded as soon as they realized the homeowners weren't going to just accept it. That's how it should work. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the kids play. The evening sun cast long shadows across the restored park, and everything was peaceful. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't fought?" Jennifer asked. "All the time. There'd be an apartment building there instead of this park. Patricia and Gregory would have gotten away with it, and every other HOA board would have learned they could do the same thing. We really did change things, didn't we?" "Yeah, I think we did." Marcus joined us a few minutes later, carrying his daughter on his shoulders. "Did you guys see the new sign the board put up at the entrance?" "Not yet," I said. "Come on, you have to see this." We walked together to the neighborhood entrance. There, next to the Riverside Meadows sign, was a new bronze plaque. It read, "This park and all common areas are the permanent property of the homeowners of Riverside Meadows, protected by deed and by law. May this community always stand together to protect what is rightfully ours." Below that, in smaller letters, Restored 2026 after a successful class action lawsuit by the homeowners against those who sought to take it from us. Wow, Jennifer said. That's pretty direct. I love it, I said. Future homeowners should know what happened here. They should know that we fought for this place. And won, Marcus added. As the sun set over Charlotte that evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Genuine pride in my community. Not the manufactured pride of marketing materials and carefully managed appearances, but real pride earned through collective action and sacrifice. We'd been tested, and we'd passed. We'd faced corruption and fought back. We'd turned anger into organization and organization into justice. And in the process, we'd reminded ourselves and others that ordinary people still have power when they choose to use it. The park lights came on automatically as darkness fell, illuminating the playground and walking trails. Emma ran over, grass-stained and happy. "Dad, can we come back tomorrow?" she asked. "Absolutely," I said, ruffling her hair. "This park isn't going anywhere, not anymore." She ran back to her friends, and I stayed for a moment longer, taking it all in. The laughter of children, the sound of neighbors chatting, the sight of families enjoying the space we'd fought so hard to protect. It had been worth it. Every difficult moment, every stressful day, every dollar spent on legal fees. It had all been worth it to preserve this place for our community and to stand up for the principle that our rights meant something. As I walked home with Sarah and Emma, I thought about Patricia sitting in prison, about Gregory's ruined career, about Paul Hendrick's lost law license. I didn't take pleasure in their suffering, but I didn't regret their consequences either. They'd made choices, bad choices that hurt a lot of people, and they were paying the price. And maybe, just maybe, other HOA board members across the country had read about what happened to them and thought twice before trying something similar. That night, as I was falling asleep, Sarah asked me one more question. "If you could go back to that Tuesday when you came home and saw the bulldozers, knowing everything you know now about how hard the fight would you do it again?" I didn't even have to think about it. In a heartbeat. "Me too," she said. The legal settlement funds were completely distributed by November, with every homeowner receiving their share along with detailed accounting of where every dollar had gone. The transparency was refreshing after years of Patricia's opaque financial management. The Riverside Meadows story became something of a legend in HOA reform circles. Rebecca Torres was invited to speak at conferences about HOA law, using our case as an example of how homeowners could successfully challenge board overreach. She always invited me to come along, and when my work schedule permitted, I did. At one conference in Atlanta, a man approached me during the break. "Mr. Peterson, I just want to thank you. Your story gave my neighborhood the courage to fight back against our board. They were trying to eliminate our playground to save on maintenance costs. We showed them the Riverside Meadows case, and they backed down immediately." Stories like that made everything worthwhile. We hadn't just saved our own park, we'd created a blueprint that others could follow. The criminal appeals process dragged on for Patricia and Gregory, but their convictions were upheld at every level. The evidence had been too overwhelming and the jury verdicts too solid. By the end, even their attorneys admitted privately that there had never been much hope of overturning the convictions. 2 years after the initial bulldozers appeared, I attended a community meeting where we discussed adding a new feature to the park: a small amphitheater for outdoor concerts and community events. The discussion was lively but respectful, with multiple homeowners offering different perspectives. When the vote was called, it passed with 78% approval. The board members carefully documented everything, following every procedural requirement to the letter. No one ever wanted to risk another lawsuit. After the meeting, as people were filing out, a new homeowner approached me. She and her family had moved in 6 months earlier, buying one of the few houses that had gone up for sale. "I heard about what happened here," she said. "The previous owners told us the whole story. That's actually why we wanted to buy in this neighborhood. We figured any community that would fight that hard for what's right was a community we wanted to be part of." That comment stuck with me. Our worst moment had become our defining moment, the thing that made Riverside Meadows special. Not the carefully maintained lawns or the architectural consistency, but the willingness of neighbors to stand together against injustice. Emma was getting older now, and she'd started asking more detailed questions about what had happened. One evening at dinner, she asked why Miss Brennan had tried to sell the park. "People sometimes do bad things when they think they can get away with it," I explained. "Miss Brennan thought nobody would stop her, so she did something she knew was wrong." "But you stopped her," Emma said. "A lot of people stopped her. Me, Marcus, Jennifer, our lawyer, and hundreds of neighbors who all worked together." "Is that why it's important to stand up to bullies?" I smiled, out of the mouths of babes, as they say. "Yes, exactly, that's exactly why." "Good," Emma said firmly. "I like our park." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." The park became Emma's favorite place, and I was grateful every day that she'd grow up with access to green space and community amenities. That was what we'd fought for, really. Not just the land itself, but what it represented. A promise made to families that we'd have a certain quality of life, a certain kind of neighborhood. When that promise was broken, we'd had a choice. We could accept it, complain impotently, maybe move away, or we could fight. We chose to fight, and it made all the difference. Years from now, long after the details have faded and the key players have been forgotten, kids will still play in that park. They'll climb on playground equipment and run on grass and walk on trails, never knowing how close they came to losing it all. And that's okay. That's actually perfect. Because the best victories are the ones that become invisible, where people benefit from what you fought for without realizing there was ever a fight at all. The park will just be the park, a permanent feature of the neighborhood, as solid and reliable as the houses themselves. But for those of us who were there, who lived through those months of uncertainty and struggle, we'll always know. We'll know what it took to preserve this place. We'll know that our community rights were nearly stolen from us, but that we took them back. And we'll know that when the moment came, when we were tested, we didn't back down. We stood together, fought hard, and won. And that knowledge, that pride, will stay with us forever. The Riverside Meadows Park stands today as a testament not just to green space preservation, but to the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change when they refuse to accept injustice. It's a reminder that our rights are only as strong as our willingness to defend them, and that community means standing together when it matters most. Some battles are worth fighting, and this was definitely one of them.